Hello, and welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Bell. A healthy organization begins with healthy leadership, and healthy leadership requires boundaries. In this episode, we explore the important role boundaries play both inside and outside of an organization, from the way leaders use authority and influence with staff to how they engage publicly on social media. Joining us today is Heartbeat's Michele Cheresnick and Betty McDowell, a licensed social worker and longtime leader within Heartbeat International and the Pregnancy Help movement, bringing years of experience and practical insight to this timely conversation. Thanks for joining us today, ladies. Michele, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, Betty.
Hey, Michele.
I am so excited that I get to do this with you today. It's just such a joy to see you, but I always feel like I learn so much from you when we're together. So I appreciate you. Before we jump into today's topic, catch us up. What's been going on with Betty? Where's the life been taking you? Where's the Lord been leading you?
Thanks for asking, Michele. And Lauren, it's really nice to be with both of you. I like retired life, although my husband and others say I'm not really retired. It just depends on your definition. I definitely am living life at a slightly slower pace. However, there are lots of opportunities to serve. And so whenever I have the opportunity and I'm available, I jump in and serve wherever. And that might mean like at the Heartbeat Conference, it might mean setting up a hospitality suite for our internationals, to traveling to West Virginia, like we did a couple of weeks ago, to speak at the West Virginia Coalition and do some training on client care. So again, just taking advantage of what comes my way and actually spending some time with younger leaders as well. So that's kind of where I put my time, and wherever Jarrell or anyone else at Heartbeat says, come join us, I'm there.
I love that. So today's topic is about healthy leaders and healthy boundaries. And there's usually a story behind a topic like this, Betty. So I would love to know the story, but also what drew you to wanting to have this conversation around healthy leadership and healthy boundaries?
Thanks for asking even that question. That's a good one. Because I think this workshop in many ways is really a culmination of lessons I've learned, lessons I wished I had learned, some I wish I had learned better, and in working with younger leaders, watching them and the challenges that they have. I mean, when I think of ministry, any ministry, but in particular looking at the world of pregnancy help, these are leaders who are living their lives set in a love story that exists in a world at war. And it's quite challenging. And so to be a cheerleader, to be a mentor, to be a coach to a leader is, it's an honor, it's a privilege. And again, things I've learned and things that I'm learning, because you don't ever stop learning. And so really this was a labor of love in putting together things that I thought would be helpful. And so today we'll get to cover a few of those things as we go along. So that's kind of the story behind how this workshop was even put together.
Tell us, what do you think leaders need? What should we be doing? What should we not be doing? And what do healthy boundaries look like? What do we as leaders need to consider?
So when I think of the role of leader, I think of how leaders have to walk in submission and in authority. And so it's really helpful sometimes to look at leadership. And actually, when I'm talking about healthy leadership, I'm not talking about perfection, because that doesn't exist. But we should be able to be growing and developing our skill set. And I think that we live in a world today where we often think of, we want to be friends with our staff and friendly, and those are all really good things. But I think it's also helpful for a leader kind of to step back and take inventory of their role. I mean, you look at your job description, you understand there's some boundaries with the job description of what you do and what you don't do. And also looking at relationships within the organization. Oftentimes, in fact, recently working with a leader who stepped into a role in a large organization and then moved, so to speak, up on the org chart. So colleagues that she was friends with, she's still friends with them, but she is now their supervisor. And sometimes that's really hard for her to sort out that role and understanding that, okay, now I'm the supervisor, and having conversations with your staff when the org chart even changes of understanding that, okay, I'm talking to you now, Michele, as a friend. I'm talking to you now as your supervisor, and just understanding there are primary aspects to relationships and recognizing them and thinking about just kind of some simple examples. If I go to my physician, that is a doctor-patient relationship. That's the primary relationship. I happen to know my physician. We're friends. And so we usually spend a minute or two talking about family. But I don't go in there to spend that time talking about family because the primary relationship in that moment is the doctor-patient relationship. And so sometimes we have to be aware of those relationships within the organization. There's the other aspect of a CEO who comes in brand new, moves to a new city, has this job, they are the CEO, and now they're trying to build those relationships with staff. There's still the primary relationship of being the supervisor, and certainly you want to be friendly. There's a difference between being maybe friends and friendly. I mean, we can be friendly with our friends, but with the some of the positions that come in to help in an organization, we're friendly with those perhaps consultants or the IT person who comes in to help, but they may not necessarily be friends. Your primary role with them is that you are hiring them to do a job. So just understanding that mindset alone has been really helpful for some leaders. So to take inventory of those relationships, because if we walk in authority and under authority, which is really what a leader does, they may be, if you're a CEO, you're on the board, but you also walk in submission on the board. And if we walk those things out well, we've set an example, and then we want to empower our team to also walk in authority and under authority. One of the other things that I've found that has been really helpful, and I know Lauren will put this in the show notes, is just this link to what we call the Johari window. And a lot of people go, ooh, Johari, that must be like a new agey thing. It's not, folks. It was two Christian psychologists named Joe and Harry. So why it became Johari, I don't know. But they really came up with this perspective to kind of look at life. And in it, it's kind of this, four windows, and the edges of the window are not solid. So one of those windows would be kind of the private area. Often it's called the hidden area. That's stuff that is all about me that I don't share with anybody. I only know it. I may or may not share it. It's hidden. Then there's the open area, also known as the public area. That might be things about me that I share openly. Then there's an area called the unknown. It's unknown to me. It's unknown to the public. It's kind of a God only is the best way to describe it. And then there's an area that's called blind spots, which is unknown to me, but known to you. And so an example I'd like to use in looking at this window is in our world, a woman who has had a traumatic experience. She's had an abortion, and she is beginning to walk through healing in her life. And in that unknown window, we'll call it a God window, God begins to share with her this area of healing that she needs. Well, that window becomes a little smaller, and that private window becomes a little bigger. She seeks help. She goes through counseling, she goes through therapy, she goes through support group. And now she has a testimony, and she begins to tell people about her traumatic experience and how it affected her life and how she's living her life now. Well, that becomes an open or public window. So therefore, the private window gets a little smaller, the public window gets a little bigger. When it comes to the blind spot area, the only way that blind spot area, and we all have blind spots, the only way that can be addressed is to have truth-telling relationships. And so working with leaders, I'll often ask them, Hey, who's Team Michelle? Who would you say is Team Michelle? Who are some people that could really drive the truck across the bridge to tell you some hard things that you could handle? And oftentimes a leader will give me like 2 or 3 names, and then I'll ask, so do those people know that they are truth tellers to you? And they often say, well, no, not really. And so then the questions come up, well, can employees be that? Can an employee, can a colleague be that? And the answer to that is what every lawyer would say, though I'm not a lawyer, I'm a social worker, but they would say it depends. So you have opportunities to have relationships with staff that can help you in seeing those blind spots. But you also have some people in your life who are really key people who know you. Your spouse knows you really well. If you have a mentor, they know you really well. For me, it is my mentor, Lou, my husband, Craig, my sister, Mary. Those are kind of top 3. I have a few other relationships that are very much truth-telling relationships. And we want to have truth-telling relationships. And sometimes we think, well, I'm a truth teller, then I will tell you every truth, whether or not you want to hear it, but the relationship may not be strong enough for that. So these are relationships that are really, they take time to develop. You invest in them and they invest in you. They don't have agency in your life to tell you exactly what you do. You still have agency, but it does provide for input. So you can have some of these in the office, but you really do need to have these relationships. Actually, whether you're a leader or not, you would do well to have some truth-telling relationships. So the Johari window is a good example. And so when working with leaders, that's an area where I'll often spend time asking them, who are those leaders or who are those truth tellers and how can they develop those relationships further? That plays into those internal relationships within the organization, but then they also help us step outside of the organization.
I'm fascinated by the truth tellers. We talked a little bit about it when we were in West Virginia together,
Mhm.
and it's kind of stuck with me. And one of the things that you said, and I just wrote it down, is you need to tell your people that who you think are your truth tellers, that that's what you're expecting of them in
Well,
case.
and give them the freedom, because in
Right.
my own life, I have a dear friend that I had asked, like, hey, would you be a truth teller to me? And she was like, oh, I love you, but I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm afraid of like, what does that mean? And I really had to let her off the hook. She's still a very dear friend, and she is in one sense a truth teller, but it's not to that deep level. And I think that's it was better for her to not be that.
Not everyone that you're close to, not everyone, because you could hurt them, right? As well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think sometimes we think as leaders that it is our job to, we want to speak the truth in love. But again, it doesn't mean that we just blatantly go and pick apart somebody's life. That's a cherished relationship that's developed. And when it comes to really that truth telling relationship, one of the things that I think has become so apparent, especially working with younger leaders, is how do we handle media? How do we handle our lives? Or where does my life end in ministry begin? And leaders struggle with, I see things on social media of their lives and their work are so merged, there's no boundary. Now, I believe in kind of having an integrated life is a good way to describe it. Um, but how much of your life do you share? How much do you expose? And this idea of branding, particularly self-branding. And so for someone to have a truth teller, to be able to ask someone like, why are you posting that? Um, just asking some of those good questions about who is it honoring? How important is it that you are putting out there? Is it your perfect life? Is it you're the perfect leader and how you serve people? And I particularly love the work of Henry Nouwen. He really took from really the book of Matthew and Luke in particular, looking at the temptations of Christ when the enemy has him, Satan has him out in the wilderness, and he tempts him with 3 things, and it was like turning stone into bread, jumping off the cliff and bowing down to the enemy. And Henry Nouwen would say those temptations are alive and well in our lives today. And the temptations are to be relevant, to do something spectacular, and to be powerful. And on the surface, in ministry, we want to be relevant. We want to be doing spectacular things for the movement, for God, for his kingdom. And we want to walk in authority and power. But I do think it's really easy to get caught up in putting out something that's not really you. It goes back to that image making and self-branding. And I think it's good for us to understand there are entrepreneurial things and people write books. And so we want to hear about those things. But I think there's a line and there's a balance. And I think it's helpful to be able to have someone to help you look at those things and to look at how much we put ourselves out there. So I think that's one of the biggest temptations and the biggest struggles. And so working with young leaders and helping them as they develop truth-telling relationships. I'm a truth teller, but I'm not like the one of the top 3 in somebody's life, but I can bring some of those curious questions to them. In fact, in a lot of ways, this is really practicing the love approach with leaders and being able to ask curious questions and be able to help them and to understand, even with boundaries, there are some boundaries that are clear-cut boundaries. You just don't cut across a boundary. There's some ethical things we just don't do. But your skin is also a boundary. Your skin also has this flexibility, which means the boundaries can shift and change a little bit. There is a limit, but there's some margin in there. And so as leaders, we can look at that and decide, okay, well, I may be promoting something I've done, but it doesn't mean I promote every single thing I've done. So I just see this as such a challenge. And in that process, I was realizing in working with younger leaders, there were several different areas and topics that we were continually going back to. And so I decided to kind of create a little something for people to work off of. And well, that'll be in the show notes, just a little bit of a survey. And it's certainly not, it's a work in progress. It's just kind of where I've been in the last couple of years working with younger leaders. And it gives us a chance to look at your passion for the ministry, your life priorities, courage. I'm reading off my list: humility, kindness, loyalty, generosity, honesty, that image making, and spiritual warfare. And so it allows the leader or the person taking the survey to kind of do a little bit of a self-evaluation of where they are in some of these areas. You could get overwhelmed if you do all of them. So when I'm working with a leader, I usually pick 1 or 2. And I decided to make this available for people because I found that if you can pick an area like your passion for ministry, to kind of look at, where your energy level is in passion for ministry, that gives you something to discuss perhaps with your truth teller. And for me, that was key because at one time in my life, I served on staff at a church, loved my job. I think I did a great job, and it was a convenient job. But I knew at some level that I was not supposed to be there, that I was supposed to move over to Heartbeat. And I avoided it because it really was convenient. It worked with our lives. And it wasn't until my husband and my sister, who happened to be truth tellers, were making kind of comments to me about, hey, the sparkle in your eye is missing. You're not talking about ministry with the same passion that you once had. Like, what's going on? That was a good place for me to start to explore and come to terms with the fact that I really was supposed to move forward. So that's kind of an example of being able to take one of these areas and explore it a little bit more. So those are the things that have come in handy in helping leaders to understand how they can be healthy and how they can really take survey and make some adjustments and maybe even a plan of action in stepping forward with having healthy boundaries, both inside and outside of the organization.
Give me 2 things that I could do today
Mm-hmm.
to improve my leadership based on what we've talked about? Just 2 action steps that I could actually feel good about accomplishing and wouldn't feel overwhelming.
So I'll go back to Henry now, and because he talks a little bit about his solution in looking at those temptations. He would say, embracing humility. So, which usually means for a leader, slowing down and examining what is humility, what does it look like? When I think about the people that I know in my life who really exude humility, um, they don't even have social media accounts. So I think that says something right there. I'm not saying folks get rid of your accounts, but it says something to me. Obviously, your prayer life. He talks about genuine service, which means instead of being in the limelight, he would say it's kind of like joining the secret service or the mundane ministry. Bring yourself to the mundane. Some of the most famous folks out there famous in that they have enriched my life with their writings, they've long since passed. Brother Lawrence would be one of them. He would wash the dishes in a monastery, and that's where he would experience God. It's a ministry of the mundane, brings him to the reality of life. So as a leader, I know most of us do practice the mundane, but to find God in it and to experience God in it. And then Nowen talks about authentic relationships. So I would say, hey, answer the question. Who are 3 people that are your truth tellers? And do they know that? And if you don't have those 3 names, that's where you begin to slow down and pray, ask God to even show you who they might be, and to just write their names down and begin to pray about how you move forward in those relationships. So a couple practical things there.
Love that. Thank you, Betty. I know that that's what I've been thinking about since we first talked about it, is who are my truth tellers and did they know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just even, are those the truth tellers that the Lord would have for me? Not just ones that are easy that I know they're going to say nice things about me and say the nice things to me, but are those the ones that the Lord has planted right in front of me? So it has been a journey of prayer since we chatted last. Who's going to take on the burden of being truth teller and just praying for them and praying to receive well what they may feel like they need to say to me, but didn't feel like they had, I don't want to say the right, but like it wasn't the time. But giving them the freedom to say, look, if the Lord put it on your heart that you were my truth teller, now we're confirming it. So, and I think that is such an amazing gift that we have in fellowship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I also have found that a lot of leaders, Michele, would say, oh, nobody's got time for this. I've got this mission. I've got to move this team forward. And yes, you do. But there are times where it's best that you slow down in order to speed up.
Yeah.
And so Heartbeat has so many opportunities to help dive deeper into this. One of which is something coming up this summer that maybe you can even talk about, because I know Built to Lead folks come and do some work with us and can take some of these ideas that I just brought to you and help leaders really develop as leaders. So slowing down in order to speed up in terms of carrying out the mission that you were hired to carry out.
Yeah. Before I switch into that mode, anything else that you want to share with us about leadership today?
Again, I think leadership can be lonely at times. There are moments it's lonely, but I don't think it has to be as lonely as folks tend to think it is. Having those truth-telling relationships is key. I've also seen kind of what you said. Oh, I have this group of people. They're just so nice to me, and they're your cheerleaders, and we need cheerleaders. But we also need some people who can really help us call us out on our stuff. So again, this is a journey. This doesn't happen overnight. So these are things for you to think about as you're serving. But if you are running into challenges internally in an organization, oftentimes it's valuable to look at things like job descriptions and look at those internal boundaries and how you're relating to people. And then really, how are you spending your time outside of that? And what does your organization require of you in terms of social media and your boundaries in terms of representing the organization outside of who you are? So just understand this is a process, it's a journey. And again, you are part of a love story that's in a setting at war. And so it's not easy, but there still is joy and adventure to be had. So just that blessing for leaders. It's like, go, I want to cheer you on.
Thank you, Betty. I am so thrilled to have had time with you today. What you alluded to, Built to Lead, is at PHI, Pregnancy Help Institute, this summer, July 20th through the 24th at Columbus. You can go on to heartbeatservices.org and look up that training. Thank you again, Betty, so much for being with us today.
Hey, my pleasure.
Well, thanks, ladies. I really appreciate this extremely insightful and helpful and timely conversation, and taking time to share with our community today on just how to set those healthy boundaries and who to identify as a truth teller in your life. So thank you so much. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in today. If you have not yet subscribed, please be sure to do so you don't miss another episode. And we hope you have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.